Hello, my name's Amy and welcome to this autumnal reading vlog. Now it is a really long time since I've done a reading vlog and I suspect the last one I filmed was actually in October of last year. What I'm going to be focusing on in this vlog are some dark and creepy and atmospheric reads because the weather right now here is extremely autumnal. So the last book I finished was Legendborn by Tracy Dion. I finished that last night. I'm not going to really be talking about it in this vlog. I just want to mention it because I enjoyed it so much. I do not read a lot of YA these days and I don't read a huge amount of urban fantasy. This book fell into both of those categories and it was absolutely brilliant. I loved the characters, I thought the writing was great, and I know the next book is coming out next year. I am eagerly looking forward to that one. So I just wanted to mention it in case you haven't come across it before and you're looking for some great YA urban fantasy. It has lots of college campus life and it's got Arthurian mythology, but it's also got lots of deeper themes of race and history that really make it a lot deeper and more impressive than really any YA I've read in a while. So with that quick recommendation out of the way, let's talk about what I'm going to be reading in this vlog. We are starting off with You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce. Now I have this one on my Kobo and I think I bought it last year. My first thought looking at it was that it was a horror novel and I wondered why I'd bought it because I don't really read horror. However, looking at the reviews, it seems more of a creepy, unsettling thriller with some fairy mythology in there, which sounds perfect for this time of year. I've read the first couple of chapters so far and it starts off with the death of a famous romance novelist. She leaves in her will that she wants her niece and nephew to go to her house after her death, or in fact she's actually missing and has been missing a year, but we're assuming she's died. Once her family members get to her house, they are to read a manuscript she has left behind in her office, and after this they can choose whether to inherit her estate or not. That is the entirety of what I've read so far. The writing's really nice so far. It is very easy to read, but there is just that unsettling hint of something more going on that we don't yet know about. There are lots of suggestions that this romance novelist who's gone missing had a very tragic history. There are multiple deaths in her past of her family members and her husband. So there are lots of mysteries to solve, and I don't yet know where the fairy element comes in. There's no real hint of that in the blurb, but it's mentioned in a couple of reviews that I scanned over, so we'll see how that develops. I can't quite decide at this point whether I want it to be more thriller or more horror. I'm kind of in the mood for something a bit spooky, but if I end up not sleeping for a week, I may regret that. I'm now halfway through You Let Me In, so I thought it was time for an update. I'm finding it hard to put my thoughts on this book into words. It's not exactly what I expected. I really wouldn't call it horror. Maybe supernatural thriller. I'm not entirely sure how to classify it, which is fine. I wasn't exactly expecting full-on horror, but I'm really not sure what to make of this book. For one thing, it follows the approach of one character going through from childhood to adulthood. That to me is always a bit of a hard sell. I don't love that structure in fiction. It's very commonly used, plenty of books employ it, but to me, the simple fact that we are going chronologically through a single individual's life makes the structure too predictable, which is a strange thing to say, I know, because everyone's life goes chronologically, but somehow in fiction that doesn't necessarily work for me. I think I'm just more interested in reading about a specific moment in time and the way that intersects with the world and with other characters. So that for me has definitely been a bit of a hard sell. We've had a quick location change because my daughter suddenly desperately needed to be in the living room where I was filming. So let's continue. Now we get on to the trickier aspects of this book and the real reason it is not working for me. The entire core of this book is the story of Cassandra, her life, and her relationship with the fairies around her, specifically one fairy called Pepperman. Now, this whole relationship is deeply unsettling, and I know it is meant to be. I know that's what the author is going for. But throughout the story, there is the question of whether Pepperman exists at all, or whether Cassandra is coming up with stories to explain the trauma she's been through, and specifically sexual abuse, probably by her father. Now, the story is really leading us towards believing the fairies are real, but the whole situation is deeply uncomfortable. And even if you run with the idea that there are fairies and Cassandra is not imagining them, there is still the fact that, and I am going to go for a little bit of a spoiler here, just so I can really talk about this book properly. Cassandra still ends up getting pregnant at, I think, 14 and giving birth to a fairy child. And this is a situation in which the fairy father has been living with Cassandra and following her around for as long as she can remember, since she was a very small child. There are lots of references to him sleeping in her bed and drinking her blood. So I knew going into this story that it would be unsettling, and the fairies were definitely going to be more horror related and not kind of sexy urban fantasy fairies. But even so, I don't quite know what to make of this book. There is still a chance that the author is going to change things in the second half and make more sense of what's happening to Cassandra and the situation she's in. But even the title at this point feels a bit off-putting. The phrase, "you let me in," is something that Pepperman says to Cassandra, implying that it was her fault that he has attached himself to her. And throughout, Cassandra is repeatedly making out that Pepperman is her friend and her protector, but at the same time, it very much reads like a young girl trying to make excuses for her abuser. So I'll be very interested to see how the author ties this up in the second half. I do feel that she was very aware of what she was writing throughout. The themes and subtext of abuse are very much in your face. She's not beating around the bush with those. So I think the ending of this book is going to make all the difference. I finished You Let Me In last night, and I have to say it did mostly win me over by the end. The second half of the book continues with Cassandra's life story, but because she's an adult by this point, there is a more introspective feeling to the second half. And because of that, she takes the time to examine the things that have happened to her in her life, who is responsible for them, where the line between truth and fiction lies, and how she can best move on from those events. I thought all this examination was done very delicately. There are some really interesting conversations that happen in the second half of the book, and I think those conversations help to make sense not so much of the events that have happened, but of Cassandra's interpretation of them. Ultimately, I found the ending quite sad. We've got to this point where we've had fairies and murders, and there is a sort of creepy thriller vibe, but that is not the overall feeling I got from the end of the book. Ultimately, this is a story about a woman who has lived through decades of abuse and trauma. And in a lot of ways, whether the fairies were real or not doesn't even matter by the end. So overall, it was a really interesting read, and the writing was very strong throughout. I would definitely read other books by Camilla Bruce. I won't say this is an easy read. Don't go into it just looking for a creepy fairy book, because there is a lot more going on. And whilst I think that is the more interesting side of the story, it isn't going to be to everyone's taste. So it's time for me to pick up my second book of the vlog, which is going to be The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. And what a beautiful book it is. This one is historical fiction with a definite gothic feel. It's set in the late 19th century, and as the title suggests, it's about a possible monster living in the waterways of Essex. I have read a grand total of 18 pages at this point. We start off with the death of the husband of our main character. Again, we're starting off with some very unsettling relationship vibes. There is a sense that our main character Cora does not regret the fact that her husband is dead. She's not really grieving for him. And to be honest, she's feeling a sense of relief that he's gone. There have already been references to physical scars that she has accumulated during the marriage. And there are lines from her husband like, "What a thing it would be to have me break you and mend your wounds with gold." So we've got this interesting position that the main character is in. She's just about to attend her husband's funeral, and I think after that point she moves out of London and into Essex. And we will see where the story progresses from there. It is now the start of November. I am more than halfway through the Essex Serpent, and I think it is time to wrap this vlog up. So, thoughts on this book? I am really enjoying it so far. I felt quite early on in the first few chapters that the book had a bit of a Dickensian feel, and the characters were all very strange and a little bit grotesque. And if not grotesque, maybe that's a bit strong, they were certainly eccentric. So I wasn't sure if I was going to warm to any of them. But as I got further into the book, I felt very strongly that the author wanted us to like these characters. I found it's not always easy to predict how they're going to react to things, but at the same time, there's a surprising warmth in the way they are portrayed. Maybe they are eccentric, but they are not bad people. They are interesting and flawed, but also you get the sense that if you went to a dinner party with them, you would have a great time. And I think some of the gothic Dickensian feel to the plot is not as strong as I was expecting too. A lot of the book takes place in Essex, as you can guess from the title, but by the halfway point there has been less plot than I thought there would be. The Serpent is there in the background as a sort of rumour, a folk tale, but its impact on events has been relatively slight until the halfway point. We spend a lot more time just getting to know the characters and seeing the relationships between them build up. So whilst this is a very atmospheric read, and Sarah Perry's writing of place and landscape is absolutely wonderful, it is certainly not a scary read, and it's nowhere near as gothic as I thought it was going to be. I think a bit of historical fiction does still feel appropriate for this time of year, and I have enjoyed it immensely so far. But if you're looking for something creepy, probably wouldn't go with this one. And that is where I am going to wrap up this autumnal vlog. I hope you have enjoyed coming along with me, chatting about the books I'm reading and seeing some of the walks I've been doing this month. We have got another very stormy autumnal day ahead of us here. I don't know if you can hear the wind blowing outside. I am also now in the midst of NaNoWriMo, in which I am trying to write a novel in a month, or half a novel in my case. So I'm not reading quite as much as I was in October, but I'm still very much looking forward to finishing the Essex Serpent because I have definitely enjoyed it so far. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you for joining me. Keep reading, everyone, and I'll see you next time.